and welcome to show number 12. I am your host, Fernando Leon. Today, we are joined by Greg Skasny. He is the CTO at BlueShift Cybersecurity. And just a quick rundown on BlueShift, they deliver affordable SMB-focused cybersecurity with multiple layers of defense in depth with comprehensive XDR protection with the expertise and guidance of a 24/7, 365 SOC. Their optimized security takes a focused approach to cyber protection, hunting, locating, and neutralizing threats and vulnerabilities early on in the cyber kill chain without disrupting operations. So let's get this show started. And first, let's dive into what the MSP Corner is all about. Our main objective at the MSP Corner is to help CEOs build profitable and sustainable IT service firms. We are not just providing tools for IT firms. We're going to be sitting in meetings with you to ensure your IT firm is on track with selling value and implementing marketing strategies that will drive traffic to your site. The main focus is obviously going to be marketing, but we want to also add framework on how to sell value. IT firms are stuck selling technology or IT support. We will provide you with framework so you position your firm as an add value to your prospects. That's so important. Now, I know that 90+% of businesses rely on antiquated marketing methods. And the most popular choice is word of mouth. And we have proven methods on how to attract the ideal prospect. Now, our framework will include how to become the online authority and be the business influencer for an industry. One other area we're going to help our MSPs is with scaling. IT firms walk away from opportunities because they lack the bandwidth or skill set to scale. We've lined up resources so our members can hire on-demand resources so they can scale their business. And to deliver value, you need the right resources in place. And that comes to like your tech stack, right? You got to have the right tech stack. And our platform will offer information on products that are the ideal choice for MSPs. Templates are also a critical component when building an MSP. And we're going to have contracts, proposals, SOWs, collateral, and much more in the template section. You will have every document you need to start up your managed IT service business. So let's kick this next show off.
So what I'm going to talk about today is obviously, what we do, but more from a practical cyber defense standpoint, right? So, what I'm going to talk about is the what you want versus what you need and how to do what you need and how basically our platform can help you enable do what you need to defend organizations, whether you're an MSP or a mom and pop shop or an enterprise or whatever. It really doesn't matter. Just so you guys know a little bit about me. My name is Greg Skasny. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder here at BlueShift. Prior to that, I was a CTO and co-founder of a company called Cygent that BlueShift was spun out of. And prior to that, I spent most of my time doing offensive network engagement. So red teaming, adversary emulation, pen testing, risk management framework for all sorts of unique places and things like that. Little story past. I do have a degree in electrical engineering. I teach at cool places like for NASA and for the IRS, for state and local law enforcement, for lawyers, and I go to court and all that other kind of stuff. So I've been doing it a long time. I have a lot of fun at it. I'm just very, very curious. But I do have a character flaw that I talk fast. So I will try not to talk too fast today, but I get very excited about what I do. I'm very passionate about what we do here at BlueShift. So I may get excited and start talking fast. So I apologize in the beginning. So, and my lawyers make me say this, especially on things that are like webinars. I have no artistic capabilities whatsoever. So any pictures you see in here that I didn't explicitly say that I made, I stole from somewhere. 100% stolen, educational purposes, fair use, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to be sued. I don't particularly like lawyers. So let's get that out of the way. Even one of my best friends is a lawyer. So what I like to talk to people about is the difference between what they perceive they need, or actually what they perceive they want. Maybe rephrase that, versus what they actually need. What people want, if you go into and talk to a board of directors, you talk to C-level people in the company, or you even talk to the owner operators of small, medium-sized businesses, and you say, what do you want? What's going to come out of their mouth is, I want you to stop an adversary. And I'm going to use that word adversary. I'm not going to use the word hacker or those sorts of things. Adversary is a better term for that. So they want to prevent an adversary from getting in and doing whatever they want to do inside their organization, right? So they want a preventative model for stopping an attacker from getting in. So what you really need to be able to do, since again, since you can't prevent someone to be able to get in, what I tell people is you don't need to throw away your preventative technology. So preventative technologies, firewalls, EDRs, antivirus, EPPs, those sorts of things. You need to have good cyber hygiene. You need to make yourself a difficult target for an adversary, because that buys you time. But if you try to rely on that 100% preventative model, you're going to lose. You need a detection and response. You need to be able to have the ability to understand what's normal in your environment, so that way you can detect anomalies and respond to those anomalies very, very quickly. And there's an advantage when you do that. That's where most people fall down on. It's a difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of visibility. I'm going to talk about how we get that visibility, and you need to understand the data that you're getting at. And it's a lot of data. Defensive cyber is nothing more than a big data problem. So we need to be able to collect that data. We need to be able to normalize that data. We need to be able to write algorithms across that data to look for anomalies and then have analysts basically respond to those anomalies. And that's what most organizations need. That's what will stop an adversary once they get in, and before they can actually wreak havoc. So why is that? So I'm going to address the elephant in the room, right? So people talk about, like, okay, well, how do you know that? What data do you have that shows, that this preventative model isn't working? Well, let's just look at it from a common sense standpoint, right? Every data breach, every ransomware event, every cyber intrusion, everything you've ever heard of since the beginning of time, since someone first started doing this stuff from an offensive standpoint, the adversaries have bypassed the preventative measures in place, and 100% they all had antivirus and firewall. So this is every single time you hear about a data breach, they get past those things. They're not a barrier to entry, right? Again, they're needed. You don't turn off your firewall, don't turn off your antivirus, but it's not the complete deterrent. Every place that got ransomware had antivirus, right? So, or an EPP or an EDR, those sorts of things. So they're in place. So we got to think a little bit different, right? So we know the proof's in the pudding. We have to change the model, right, to be able to defeat adversaries nowadays, right? The reason for this has to do with a lot of things, right? So the attack surface, what's available to an attacker now is expanding. Everybody works from home, everybody's remote, everybody's dying to move to the cloud and do all this stuff and do it from anywhere. That's just that is a field day for an adversary. Same thing with vulnerabilities and 0 days. 0 days used to be 5 years ago, when I talked about 0 days, was, they're reserved for nation state level attacks. You don't really see these in small business because they were expensive, and adversaries weren't burning the infrastructure of 0 days on most medium-sized businesses, even larger companies. Today, that's all gone out the window. 0-day attacks happen all the time. There's so much software out there. Their software is rushed to market. They don't do the proper, vetting and security vulnerabilities. They're trying to get updates out as quick as possible to stay ahead of the competition, and mistakes happen. So 0-day vulnerabilities are out there. And when that happens, there's not much you can do other than detect and respond to a 0-day attack. And I'm going to go through one that we actually detected and responded to a little bit later here, so you can kind of see the idea of that. So when you go on that purely preventative model, the problem is that now, the adversary, they hear this all the time. We did pen testing, right? So adversary, I only have to be right once, and you as a defender have to be right 100% of the time, which means you have to be perfect. So you can't be perfect. So you put yourself at a disadvantage if you don't have that sort of, that detection and response piece in place. That's the way you take a tactical advantage against the adversaries, right? So if you have that detection response and you're monitoring, you're watching what's abnormal in the environment. Now, once that adversary does that initial compromise, which we know they're going to do, like, we give up the fact we know they're going to compromise that infrastructure. Matter of fact, our new customers, we assume they're compromised until we can prove otherwise. But once they make that initial compromise, they have to be very, very quiet. if they trip any IOC or any TTP that we're looking for, so IOC is indicator of compromise for people who don't know. TTP is the tactics, techniques, and processes. It's the how adversaries do what they do, which I'll talk about here in a second. They trip one of those that we detect. Again, they have to be perfect. They don't know what we're watching. We can then take advantage of that and remove them from the environment. Stop their command and control, stop their exfiltration, remove their malware, their access points, all that sort of thing, and get them out of the environment quickly and shore up the holes with how they got in the first place. So you become a much harder. Every time that happens, you become a harder target, which is good. So we put that perfection model onto the adversary. So we put them on the losing end of the equation, right? That's the goal of what we want to try to do. If you take one thing away from this presentation, when it comes to what you need to do for defensive cyber, take this slide with you. Everybody always asks what metrics we should look at when it comes to cybersecurity, whether it's mean time to resolution and all this other stuff that really doesn't, it's important from operating a SOC, but it's really not important from a business standpoint. This is the metric that's important from a business standpoint, because this is going to determine whether you have a really bad day or you just have an inconvenience. So this metric is what we call dwell time. Dwell time is the time from an initial compromise, which I said that we know is going to happen. So we're going to give it the fact we know that initial compromise is going to happen, until the time that compromise is detected. In the United States, so obviously that's the time that the adversary has been in that environment. In the United States, according to IBM, it's 207 days that the average adversary spends inside an organization. The problem when you go to respond to a data breach or cyber intrusion where an adversary group has been in there for 100 days or 150 days or, God forbid, over 200 days, the cost to remediate that is very, very expensive. What you have at that point is you have a real incident, which means if you have any kind of regulatory compliance or you follow any sort of incident response process, that means you're dusting off the incident response plan, you are convening the incident response team, you are probably calling in attorneys, which if you are breached at that level, your first call should be to an attorney. You can ask me why later, but get your stuff under attorney-client privilege. But you're calling in attorneys, your forensic investigators. If you have regulatory obligations, you're contacting your regulators. You're going to have to report that to your regulators. You're probably going to be on the news. You're probably going to have to replace some infrastructure, right? So the cost you're talking, on a small scale, 40, 50, 60 grand. On a large scale, you're into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially if you're a large organization. Some of them gets into the millions of dollars to remediate these ransomware events or any cyber intrusion, data theft, all that kind of stuff. That's a problem, right? So no one wants to go through that. Versus if you can take this dwell time and shrink it to an hour, a minute, an hour, or a day, what you have is an event. You don't have an incident. You have something that's happened. Someone has either taken advantage of a vulnerability or a weakness or a mistake, whatever the case would be. They got in your organization. You got some malware. It becomes an IT operation, right? It's remove that machine, nuke and pave it, format it, and put it back to a gold standard, patch the hole, put it back on the network, monitor, and away you go. It's an hour or two worth of time. It's a minor inconvenience. It's not, it's not an incident. You're not reporting it to people. If you have an exfiltrated in data or no one has gotten access to data that they're not supposed to, which you can prove with our platform, it becomes a non-issue. It just becomes very, very simple to remediate. And I'm going to go, like I said, I'll go through a zero-day attack where we did that. So the way we do that, and the way that should be done, is by looking at things, again, stolen graphic, but on this pyramid of pain, right? So all these things you see here are available in every environment, both from a defensive standpoint, and they're also available from an adversary perspective, right? So things below this line are things that are plentiful, right? But the problem is they change a ton, but they're mathematical in nature. So you can collect those things about your adversaries. You can collect those things about your customers, and you can start running baselines, and you can use automation, which is what we do. Because they're mathematical based, you can use heavy levels of automation to look for anomalies within that data. When you detect an anomaly, you can then bubble that up to an analyst, which is what we do, to make a hypothesis about what they see, right? So the best way to look at things from a SOC perspective is to have this threat hunting mentality, where you see something odd, you make a hypothesis about what you're seeing, and you go hunt for the things that would make those things malicious, right? Because not everything you're going to see here is malicious. Some things that even look malicious may not be malicious, but you want to hunt for the things that would prove that that's malicious. So looking for tools, right? So looking for cobalt strike, which is a little easier to detect, or silver, or living off land binaries, or PowerShell Empire back in the day, those sorts of things. The tools that adversaries use, right? Best suited to look for by an analyst, because automation is tough to see those tools. Same thing with TTP. So the tactics, techniques, and procedures. TTPs is if you're not in the InfoSec world, if that's a new term for you, it's something that we talk about all the time. The whole MITRE ATT&CK framework is based around TTPs, and TTPs are the how. It's how adversaries do what they do. It's how they use Active Directory to do reconnaissance. It's how they pivot in environments. How they elevate privileges. It's how they scrape LSAS databases and those sorts of things that happen there. So TTPs are tough for automation, because a lot of the tools that they'll use are legitimate tools. So you need to have that human element to look for those things to say, is this legitimate tool being used in a malicious way? And then correlate that with what you see down here. So that's kind of what our SOC does. But again, if you can highly automate this, because this is a lot of data, a lot of pain in the butt, your analysts can spend their time up here, right? And that's what we strive to do with our SOC. That's what our platform helps to do. So it sounds simple, but it's not easy. Just real quick, so what our platform provides in this is what you see on here. I know this is a busy screen, but what we try to do is, you can't defend what you can't see. So we try to get visibility into an organization as quickly and as cost effectively as possible. And we do that with our platform and how we install it. So our platform is based around kind of a SIM technology. So we do collect logs. We use an agent to grab logs from anything that's Windows, Linux, Mac, AIX, Solaris, all that kind of stuff. But it grabs both security logs, it grabs logs from programs like Sysmon, it grabs configuration information, it grabs software information, process information, all the types of stuff, and we grab all that stuff in real time, and we jam it into a big data platform to start looking for those anomalies. And then we start integrating with other things that customers may have. So security in the cloud has become very difficult, because it's not a traditional security model. So we have integrations with a ton of different cloud platforms. So your Azure, Office 365, AWS, Google Cloud, G Suite, Cato Networks, Okta, all kinds of stuff. So anything we try to integrate with from that cloud perspective to get insights into what we're seeing, so we can correlate data between what we're seeing on an endpoint versus what we're seeing in their cloud environment. Same thing with your protection platforms. So a virus like Windows Defender and Defender ATP and all that kind of stuff. We also integrate with those because they give us good telemetry. What's not interesting to us are things that get blocked because they're blocked and they're not threats. But you can start making inferences from watching patterns into how many things get blocked in an organization. If you see 2 or 3 things get blocked in a day, you may want to look at that a little bit. But if you start seeing a group of particular individuals getting things blocked from an antivirus platform or EDR platform, that's something that our SOC wants to be aware of, right? Because it can mean an indicator of attack. It means that organization may be being targeted by somebody. We need to start to kind of see what that is, right? So that gives us this good base level of information we're getting. We have an MNDR platform. So what we also want to do, and what's important for places that have networks, have offices, we have universities and banks and hospitals and all that kind of stuff where they have networks. We want to collect we want to collect network data, right? So ingress and egress traffic. So we have an MNDR platform that goes in and does that as well. The reason you want to analyze packet data is kind of a couple different. Well, there's actually 3 reasons. One is it's non-bypassable, right? So software is bypassable. Actually, we were investigating something the other day with our SIM agent that there was a piece of malware that was trying to that would shut off our SIM agent along with like an RMM tool and things like that. And we noticed that. We're like, okay, why is this happening? And figured out what it was. But there are ways, again, if giving enough access to a machine, that you can bypass software. Any software is bypassable. Network data is not bypassable. Adversaries have to use it. They can't stop me from being on a spanner or tap or being in line. So they can't stop us from grabbing that data and looking at it and analyzing it. So they have to use it. It also sees all the things, right? And what I mean by all the things is there's tons of things in a network, depending on again, if you talk about a hospital, IoT devices, you're talking about a manufacturing plant, ICS and OT devices. You talk about a lawyer's office, right? They have networking equipment, all kinds of stuff that sits on the network that adversaries use all the time as both initial compromise, They use it for persistence. They use it to pivot. I mean, if you guys heard this recent Volt Typhoon um, thing where they were getting access into systems and using living off the land binaries, but that initial compromise point was done by compromising fully patched Fortinet firewalls, right? So no one has an EDR agent on their Fortinet firewall. But you still need to watch those sorts of things to see what's happening with those devices. Same thing with, again, networking equipment, all that stuff. So you need to see all the things, and that's what that network piece of it does. The nice thing is you can also block things easily with a network appliance, right? You can block exfiltration, you can block command and control, you can stop those things that even if they were able to get in, you can stop them from doing things like stealing your data and those sorts of things. So we do have that component with our, and you'll see how that works out really well here in the end here. We have automation, obviously. We have automation around everything we do. It's the core of what we do, and our platform is monitored by our SOC. But that's the core of the platform, and the real value in the platform too is not only what we do and what we can provide from a technology standpoint, but again, if I gave most people access to the data that we collect, it's very difficult to make sense of it if you don't work and look for those things in the day to day. I mean, if your job is to both, do tickets and do break fix and plan and manage servers and do all that kind of stuff, trying to look at this data on a day-to-day basis, it just gets to be too much. So having a SOC in the background really, really makes a difference.
Hey,
So
Greg.
Yes.
Hey, I got some questions coming up in the chat box. I'm sorry to interrupt because
No,
you are on a
please
roll.
do.
We have Aaron Hampton asking if he's got three great questions, so I'm gonna bring each one up. So, does your agent work on Android and iOS phones?
No, not yet.
Okay, it's in
I
the pipe.
apologize.
It's
Well, it's something we're looking at, and I would be honest, like, people worry about phones, and I understand it. Phones are not a huge attack surface yet. There are some things that are cumbersome with phones. Mostly mostly around zero-click attacks. We have
okay.
very few, but those things they're kind of reserved. Realize a zero-click vulnerability is worth a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
So like we have customers that are in that model. But what I will say is if their phones get connected to their office Wi-Fi and they're behind one of our network sensors, we do profile the data that comes out of that phone, and we have detected oddities on phones by looking at the network data.
Now, second question is, can you review the out-of-the-box compliance reporting for like NIST 800, dash 53, NIST 800-171, CMMC, FFIEC, PCI dash DSS?
Yes, we do address a lot of those. I have a white paper that was written by a third party. Oh, God, I don't remember their name off the top of my head. I should. Because I'm thinking something different. But yes, I have a white paper that shows how we mapped in NIST 800-171 for CMMC in particular. So we're happy to share that out, and our guys can get that kind of stuff out too. So,
Awesome.
but we do it. We go in banks and stuff like that. We do help with compliance. Our platform is not a compliance first platform because I'm a firm believer that if you're secure, you'll be compliant. But we do help. There are a lot of controls that we map to, especially some of the more difficult technical controls in CMMC level 2 and 3 that we map to and make it much easier for DIBs to become compliant with that.
Now, does your agent require an on-prem device?
The agent does not require an on-prem device.
Awesome. Okay.
Again, if people are interested in a demo, I'd be happy to schedule that with them to show them. There's a few different options for us to install our platform. Most of our customers opt for an on-premise, what's called an analytics device, is what stores everything we have. We do have the ability just to pop that up in a cloud or in our customer's cloud or our customer's data centers. We do those as well. But we try to keep all that data local on the customer. And for people who do CMMC, they'll understand, or people who are FedRAMP, they'll understand that. So that way we don't have to have all that data stays on premise for that customer. So we don't have to worry about, FedRAMP compliance, all that kind of stuff, because it sits on premise. So same thing with GDPR, which we do in Europe.
Awesome. And last question from Aaron is the platform FedRAMP compliant?
That's what it said. If it sits on premise at you, then and you're FedRAMP, you're good.
Okay.
We are not FedRAMP compliant. Like if it sits in our data in our cloud, it'd have to sit on your cloud that's been FedRAMP compliant. So, but the platform is used to monitor things both in GCC High and in places like that too. So.
Got it. All right, that's it. All right. He said thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions, though, by the way.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is this is D- this is Diedrich. I have a question from DigiSoc. Thank you for the information. It's great information thus far. Um, for for entities or organizations, okay, for my organization, we support multiple organizations around the world, in
Hmm.
10 different countries. And you mentioned about the data mining or the bit data that you have. How do you
Yep.
go about separating, I guess, implementing the tenancy amongst other corporations, if that makes sense?
Yep. So, I may or may have not dealt with classified data in the past. So all of our customers are compartmentalized. And what I mean by that is each customer gets, I guess, goes more in the installation model. Each customer gets their own separate installation. So, like for our customers, we have hundreds of customers. They all have their own, let's just say, installation of our product. And for most of them, it comes in an appliance. So they install this on-premise appliance that collects all the data. For some of them, like we have some large data centers, they've fired up our um, software in one of their, they've provisioned a server for us that we then provision our software on. And they provide the storage and all that kind of stuff. So it sits on premise. All those things sit on premise at each of those customers. If we do it in our cloud, they're all a separate VPC. So everything's separated. There's no way for a customer to intermingle data. That customer data is their data and it sits there. And things that they'll notice a little bit different about us too, because we have that model. We don't, we unlike some people, we don't charge for like events per second or log ingress. We provide a certain amount of storage with our devices. If you have it in your data center and your cloud, that storage is yours. You take in all logs you want, keep them for as long as you want. We have certain standards around how long we want to keep logs, both live and archive, but customers can keep them for as long as they want. And there's no limit to the amount of logs they can bring in there. That model's stupid. Sorry, but it just is.
No, you're fine. Right.
There's better value, right? The value is more in the services we offer versus the storing of log data, which anybody can do. So, but yeah, that's
Right.
how we keep everybody. That's the same thing with our GDPR customers, right? So we have customers in Europe. They have installations that sit on premise. All that data sits on premise. None of it comes back to our SOC. Our SOC gets what we call aggregated alert data, and we have an agent that allows us to query the data on those devices. But that data always sits with that customer, so you have to worry about it
So how
going anywhere.
often and maybe I need to just sign up for a demo because I can get a
Yeah,
little technical.
sure.
So how often is that updated if it's real time?
We're on a continuous update cycle. We update every day. And so
Okay.
our sensors, they have an agent, not our XDR agent, but an agent that we wrote that manages that device. So like it gets updates for alerting playbooks and vulnerability updates and all that kind of stuff and all that kind of stuff. It gets them, can get them every day. So anytime we make an update after it goes to QA in our development process, it gets pushed to production and our sensors will automatically grab that and download it and update them. So but that's all managed by us. Our customers, they don't even have to log into the device if they don't want to. The whole thing is managed by us.
So how
We
much
make it very
overhead is
easy.
that? Yeah, how much overhead is that on the client's network from a throughput
None.
perspective?
None at all. I mean, you won't even
Okay.
notice it's there. Like even if like we have strategies for the way we get logs from roaming devices and things like that. The everything compresses very, very well. So log data gets transferred. It gets converted to JSON, which gets compressed very, very well. So even network data, like we will ship our network appliances. We have some of them that are on 40 gig networks, right?
Mhm.
So we're taking in this mass amount of data, but once that machine that box that's there analyze that data and compresses it down to send it to the analysis node, it's megabytes of data, even though you're getting a 40 gigabit, connection.
Throughput,
So
yeah.
yeah, we have distributed connections. I mean, some of our customers are 30, 40 locations, so we've been through great pains to make sure that things work properly in distributed environments. But we can go small environments too. We have some people that are five people, so it goes both ways.
Yeah, it's for what I support, my company supports, we have a merit of different size organizations, large to mid-size to the mom and pops that you mentioned. I'm in the entertainment industry and we support the entertainment industry from that standpoint. So I'm definitely interested in a demo. And I didn't
Yeah,
mean to
let's get.
hijack the webinar,
No,
but
you're fine. You're fine. Let's get on.
yeah.
I'd be happy to do that for you.
Okay.
I do the demos. So the nice thing is
All
when you
right.
get a demo, I get to do them because I get to play with the dashboards and show you the stuff. It's fun. So
All right. Thanks.
you're welcome. So
All right.
what I'll jump into here is to talk about some specific things that we've seen with our platform that are usually difficult for people to detect, right? So, or respond to. So I'll start off kind of, and I'm gonna go through real quick a 0-day that we detected with paper-cut. We were one of the first people actually to detect paper-cut in an environment, and I'll talk about how we do our incident responses a little bit different. But this one was very, very interesting. So if you guys aren't aware, 3CX is a phone system, right? There was a supply chain attack against that piece of software. What it did is the adversaries were able to get into their build process, right? Insert a piece of malware into their code. 3CX then compiled that code and signed it, and then shipped that code out as an update. So the problem is now you have a signed executable, which most things trust, right? So they're just going to run it no matter what. And then they were compromised. There were some EDRs, I won't mention them, but there were some EDRs that would stop that, because what it would do when it ran, it would actually don't go and download a second stage. They noticed that an EDR would notice that and stop that from updating. The problem with what's happening is again, people are saying they're IT administrators, again, no fault of theirs, just how they're trained. This is a signed executable. I need our users to use this. It must be a false positive. I'm going to let it run anyways. And they're compromising their organizations. So when we hear about something like this, it's immediate triage for us. We go in and again, we get these aggregate alerts in our SOC. This all happened within 15 minutes. We were able to go in and search every customer we had that had 3CX installed. We could look at that over the past 60 days. Anybody who had installed it over the past 60 days, even though the exploit just happened that day. Go into those customers' machines. We track every piece of software installed, the versions, all that kind of stuff. So we had like 5 or 6 customers that had 3CX. We can go into each of those customers, find out which versions they had. If they had the vulnerable version, then which machines had that vulnerable version. And then from there, go look at the network data to see if they actually downloaded a second stage and if they were compromised. We had one person that actually had the vulnerable version, but they weren't compromised. So that's, being able to respond to stuff like this is tough. When you look at 0-day attacks, that's what's happening nowadays. I kind of go through what we've done with the 0-day cut on what we were able to see with 0-day and paper cut. So this is a real world example for those of you who don't know what a 0-day is. It's a vulnerability that is in the wild that the manufacturer doesn't have a fix for or doesn't know about. And this is one that we saw and we responded to. And so the point I want to make with this is the need to be able to collect data from many different sources and why that becomes important, right? So that's kind of what the center of our universe is collecting things from our agents, from the cloud, from EDR, and from network detection and response, because all those things play a part when you want to respond to an incident very, very quickly. There's kind of 2 schools of when it comes to incident response. It's that the NIST, the NIST framework around incident response, and then what we actually subscribe to is what's called OODA. It's observe, orient, decide, and act, and it's a methodology that was put. It's a military methodology, but it's basically around being fast, right? So speed beats raw power. If you can iterate and do things very, very quickly, make good decisions, act on those decisions, you'll be able to beat a much stronger adversary from a smaller team. So what it started with us was something simple like this. This is the actual alert. It doesn't have any customer information on it, but it said, all of a sudden, we do track things against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And if you guys aren't familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework from a security perspective, I suggest you read up on it. It's very, very good. And a lot of SIEMs don't have MITRE ATT&CK mapping capabilities, which is sad. It's easy to do. So this was a MITRE ATT&CK thing we got, that a new service was installed on a system. This is an Altera RMM system, right? So what is Altera? Altera is an RMM tool. So you guys are from the MSP world. You're familiar with RMM tools. What's interesting about Altera? Altera is one of the few, and it's on the screen if you see it. I can't say which is the classroom, so raise your hand. But they're one of the few, if only, RMM platforms that do one thing. Get started, no credit card required. You can sign up for a trial of Altera with a fake account and get it working and get access to that sort of thing. And so that's what these adversaries did. Since they don't have to put a credit card, then use this vulnerability, which I'm going to show you in a second, to install Altera. Shortly after that, we saw this, another legitimate program, Splashtop. How many of you guys here use Splashtop? I can't see your hands, but I'm guessing that a lot of you MSPs use Splashtop. The problem with what this is here, and Splashtop, obviously, what does Splashtop give you? It gives you hands-on access to a machine. So Here we see this server that got an RMM tool that's not in the environment, and in Splashtop, which they don't use in this environment either. So the problem with, again, being a signed application, it's very hard for EDR. Most EDRs, AVs, to detect it. If your application whitelisting relies on signed things like that, it's hard. No network-based detections either, because it's installed it from Altera. It was legitimate. Same thing with Splashtop. The problem becomes is that you have an RMM tool that's controlled by an adversary. So RMM tools run a system, right? They can download programs, they can run software, they can run PowerShell scripts, and then Splashtop gives them hands-on remote access. So this is an all hands-on deck sort of situation. But if you weren't looking for those type of anomalies, right? If you're not looking for the fact that something odd got installed in this environment, that Altera doesn't belong there, right? How would you detect that, right? Because it's not firing off anything else. So that we're immediately after looking at this for 5 minutes, this machine we know is compromised. So now we have to go into response mode. So what can we do? We need to isolate that machine off, right? So, and our customer unfortunately had been burned in the past about they had a ransomware incident prior to us, and they pulled the machine off and they formatted it, and then their forensic people got on them because they did that. And we were telling them immediately that we've blocked that machine from doing any ingress or egress, but you need to pull it off the network. And they're like, well, our forensic guys. I'm like, no, we have the difference with our platform. We have all the logs we need. We already have them. They're in our system. That machine's compromised. Get it off right now. Again, that's UDA. That's making decision, acting quickly. So they pulled it off. Now we need to go look for signs of lateral movement. So we need to be able to be sure before we can move on. Is there any persistence? Did they create accounts? Did they download a second stage? Did they download any other malware? Is there any other indicators of compromise as we're working with the vendor? And so those are things we can see within our system because we have access to all that stuff. So we can go through and go, okay, let's look at all the stuff that went to Splashtop, because that's probably how they're going to get their initial access. So we can pull out everything that went to Splashtop as a known, it's a known certificate, right? So we can go out and pull out anything that went to Splashtop on the network data. We only saw 10 packets. 10 packets is not enough to do a session. So we knew forensically that there was no Splashtop, hands-on Splashtop access. It was just the initial install that we saw. So that was good. Now we need to start looking at Altera. The problem with Altera, it runs a beacon, right? So Altera calls back home. So we're going to see network traffic with that. Now we need to see, was there any other software scripts run since that Altera installation, right? So we have access to all those logs. Nothing else was installed, so that was good. We got some new indicators of compromised, both from hashes and IPs that we can look for and domains we could look for. So now we can start searching for those too. So like this is where it actually downloaded the MSI from. So, yep, we know that that's the only place it went from. We're still not seeing any other signs of compromise, just that initial compromise. As time went on, and we know, and we're watching, we're very confident right now that that's all they got. They just got in initially, and it wasn't a big deal. So some of the other indicators of successful attacks is, unfortunately, there's a lot of other people who, when this happened, that weren't so lucky. They didn't catch it so quickly. And so their second stage was what's called TrueBot Command and Control. So TrueBot C2 was one of the things they use. So we can, that's a known command and control server. So we look for that command and control server with our network traffic. So obviously we didn't see that. There's no payloads for TrueBot C2, so we knew that was good. We only saw any other C2 updates that we saw from there, nothing else. They also installed another RMM tool in other places called Synchro. We didn't see those installations. And no other Altera installations were in the organization. So right now we're very confident. We didn't see other accounts being added, so no one got into an administrator account on their DCs and created accounts or things like that. So good, within about an hour and a half, we're pretty confident, right? This machine was part of a 0-day. We caught it very, very quickly. We got it off the network. They didn't get anything else happening with that, which is, they usually don't act that fast. And we can kind of see, what's going on. So we did some other searching around for like when they actually got in. Everything's timestamped accordingly in our system, right? So from logs to network traffic, everything's timestamped. So you make a really good timeline very, very quickly to see what's happening with that. And then we're like, well, let's see if we can figure out which IP, where the adversary actually came from. And so we had to obfuscate their internal IP. So we went through and found every IP address during that time frame that accessed that machine. It was a very, when that compromise happened, it was a very small window, a couple second window. So we put out every single IP. We got rid of any of their internal IPs that were doing it. We were left with a group of like 3 IPs. And this one right here just so happens after that compromise, it was flagged as malicious. So this is with a very high confidence. This is the IP that it actually came from. That did the it wasn't marked malicious at the time, but it ended up being marked malicious after the fact. So that's a pretty high confidence that I got that. So, and like I said, that was it. There's only a couple of them marked as malicious after that, but we knew that it was probably suspect. So that's probably where it came from. But again, we can obviously block that and away we go. But we caught it, as before it became an issue. So obviously we make recommendations about what to do. So restore to a good known image, patch it because the vendor had come out with patches. We're gonna look at some different logs. We're gonna keep monitoring the stuff we need to monitor for, which is the normal stuff we monitor for anywhere. But again, this was not a big deal for the customer. It was a little big deal for us because this is kind of fun. But this is the stuff we live for when we find something like this. But from the customer standpoint, it was from the amount of time they spent was basically, pulling that server offline, restoring it to no good image, applying their patches, and putting it back online. So, it's an hour, maybe two of including meetings with us, so it was really not that big a deal versus what happened to the people who didn't detect it. And this is what happened. It was a Clop ransomware gang, right? That did that. So they got ransomware from this, which is a problem because this gang does the ransomware. They do the double, I believe they do the double extortion where they'll try to steal your data as well, and then blackmail you for it and all that kind of stuff that comes with dealing with a ransomware thing. So that's this was a couple days later after Microsoft come back and said it was them guys as well too. So that's the outcome we don't want. Right. So that's why having that detection and response is so important. So I know I'm going to probably run out of time. So I think I only had 20 or 30 minutes, and I didn't even start a timer. So but this is kind of what we do in a nutshell, what we do day to day, why it's effective. If you guys are looking to see a demo or understand what we do more, I'm happy to share it with you. Like I said, I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. I show everything we do and how we do it. And why it's effective. So, we're happy to do that for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So can you tell the group what a red team and a blue team is? And then
Sure.
if you use that in your company?
Yes. So, and now I'm going to preface this, and I'm very opinionated when it comes to those terms. Okay. Red team is offensive security. So when I say things about red teaming, penetration testing, those things. Now there's a difference between what a penetration test and a real red team exercise or an adversary emulation exercise is. Most customers are not ready for a true red team. Most customers probably aren't really ready for what a true penetration test. Again, where you're trying to test security controls. You need to understand the controls that you have in place and the controls you want to test with that penetration test. What most people are ready for are an offensive assessment, right? So letting some red teamers or pen testers come in and see what they can run some things around and kind of see what they see, which is the majority of what people have done. They call that a pen test. It's really not a real pen test. Blue team cyber is defensive cyber, right? That's our team, BlueShift. I can give you the history of that name, but blue team is defensive cyber. It's the guys that sit in the background who run security operations centers and who defend your clients against red teamers, which are legitimate guys, or adversaries, which are the bad people, right? So red being offensive, blue being defensive. So sorry, I assume sometimes I assume that you get around that nomenclature for long enough time, you just assume everybody knows it.
And do you know the purple team, or do you?
So the purple team is what I did for a long time, and it's purple team is more of a methodology, more of a, I'm gonna call it a methodology, more of a an ideal versus like a pure red team, right? So what purple teaming is having red team guys that are coming in, but instead of being, it's the red team versus the blue team, it's the red team working with the blue team. I just did this X, whatever it is. I just ran PS exec and threw this unknown unsigned binary onto your DC. Did you see that? And the blue team says, no, we didn't see that. Well, why didn't you see that? Right. And let's come up with why, and working through that methodology together, it's much more effective. Right. People still like
purple
that.
teaming. Do you do any purple teaming?
We don't do any offensive work at all. We only have our platform. We only do SOC.
Okay.
The problem being is now I do work with a lot of pen testers and red teamers with some of our customers. Our customers do have those things done. But I have a mix of customers. I have a mix of customers who just want to test, right? So they just want to have a pen tester go in and test to see if we'll see something. Now, most of our pen testers aren't good. They're not. To find a really good pen tester is very difficult. There are some people out there who are very good at being pen testers, and I'm happy to tell people who I would recommend doing that. But you can find them online. Most people are not good pen testers. They're junior level guys who the first thing you go out do and scan the network for looking for ports and stuff, and that's the easiest thing to see, bar none. Real adversaries don't do that. The best penetration testers emulate adversary techniques, right? Of things you're going to see in real world cyber attacks. Unfortunately, it's like I said, when I say it's technically not easy, that's the technically difficult part. It's very easy to run an Nmap scan, right? Or run a Nessus vulnerability scan or whatever. It's more difficult to emulate the tools and the tactics and the procedures that adversaries use, because you need to have technical acumen to be able to do that. We don't do that. We don't provide that service. It's almost a fox in the hen house type deal, right? So if we're the defensive part of it and we're going to do the offensive part of it, you want another set of eyes doing that part of it. So little ethics. I'm just a little too ethical when it comes to that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Greg, that was a great presentation. I appreciate you taking time. We're going to open up the floor to anybody else who wants to ask any questions, but I'm on the live chat and no one's chiming in. Aaron Hampton was the only one that had some questions. I'm sure you answered a lot of questions for a lot of our folks. So
Yeah, I try to be thorough,
yeah. So if no one else is going to be, well, you know what? I know a couple of guys wanted to get it set up a demo. I'm going to let them reach out to you, or
Awesome.
I have Gregory managing all that also. So I'm sure we'll get something set up here for you guys, and we'll see you again. I want to have you back, right? Because we have probably 300 to 400 new members every quarter join the MSP Corner. So love to have you back, and keep educating our folks. Keep
Yeah, would love to.
keep them engaged, and I appreciate you taking time from your day.
Anytime. You guys have a great
All
day.
right.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, guys. Thanks
All right.
again.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya.